rains came down in the hollow, playing a new game, laughing and running, hey, skipping and jumping in the misty morning fog with our hearts thumping in you, my brown-eyed girl. Girl. And whatever happened, Tuesday is so slow, going down the old mine with the transistor radio, standing in the sunlight laughing, hide behind the rainbow's wall, slipping and sliding all along the waterfall with you. Here are the chords that are needed. You can play a different variety of shapes on this song of basic chords. So there's an open G, a G on the 3rd, G on the 7th, open C, C on the 3rd, a C up on the 8th. You also need an open D, a D on the 5th, a D on the 10th, an E minor, and a D7. Here's the intro. Did we go? The intro is played with these little shapes here on the 1st and 2nd string. So it starts off here on the 7th fret of the 1st string, 8th fret of the 2nd string, and then it goes up to this little shape here on the 8th and 10th frets, and then the 10th and 12th frets. So you play it like, and back down again. And that same pattern of shapes appears here, starting on the 12th fret. And that pattern repeats twice, and then you go to this little shape here on the 7th fret of the 3rd string and the 10th fret of the 2nd string. And then you play up to the 8th fret and the 10th frets of the 2nd string. Here's the tablature for the intro. The lines are the strings of the guitar, and the numbers on them are the frets that are played. Just to note on the intro, you can substitute the first set of chords. In other words, these chords, you can substitute here in this position. If it's easier for you, if you have a cutaway guitar, it might be better to play it here. So what I'm doing is on 2nd and 3rd strings, barring the 12th fret, up to 13th and 14th frets on the 2nd and 3rd strings, and then up to 15 and 16. And back down. The verse rhythm pattern is very simple. It starts off with a G to a C, back to a G, and then to a D. And this pattern repeats throughout the verses. At the end of each verse is the line, "You, my brown-eyed girl," and the pattern changes. It goes C, "You, my," to D, "brown-eyed girl," G to E minor, C to D, back to G, and then D7 leads you to the next part. If you want to play just a basic strumming pattern, you can play it like this. Hey, where did we go? Days when the rains came down in the hollow, playing the new game, laughing and a running, hey, hey, skipping and a jumping in the misty morning fog with our hearts are thumping in you, my brown-eyed girl. You, my brown-eyed girl. If you notice the guitar during the verse section of this song, there's a lot of different variations going on these chords. So one of the ways you can start to introduce these variations into your own playing is to first figure out the different shapes that you're going to be using. So we have an open G here, then you have this little G here on the 3rd fret, and then you also have this G here on the 7th fret. So if you could start to practice those different chords and include them in your playing, your playing will sound like it has a lot of variety, even though you're not doing much more than playing different chords. So the other example is the C. You can play it here. You can play this little shape here on the 3rd. You can play just like a simple bar here. You can play it here on the 8th fret, this little C shape. And also the same thing for the D. You have the open D. You have a little D here that you can throw in. And then this D here. And this little bar shape, which is just that chord. So you can add all these different variations of just the basic chords to add that first level of variation to your playing. The second level of variation that you can add is how you pick each chord. So in other words, you can pick kind of a bass note and then a descending run, or an alternating picking pattern, or just a straight up arpeggio. Downwards, you can just mix it up really. Kind of like a strummed arpeggio. So an additional layer of variety you can add to your playing is to manipulate some of these chords. Now some manipulations sound better than others, but you can start off by experimenting. So like the C chord here, you can add that 3rd fret note here on the 1st string. The D chord, you can subtract your middle finger from that chord, so you're playing the open 1st string. Up here on the G, you can add this note here on the 10th fret of the 2nd string. This D chord up here on the 10th, you can add that 12th fret note on the 1st string. So when you combine all these things together, you get a lot of variety without trying very hard. On the line, "You, my brown-eyed girl," there's a riff you can substitute for the G and E minor chords. It sounds like this. You, my brown-eyed girl. You, my brown-eyed girl. The little signature riff sounds like this. Can be played in different places on the guitar. So where I just played it here was 1st and 3rd strings on the 3rd and 4th fret, up to the 5th fret, 1st and 3rd strings, back down again, and then 2nd fret, 1st and 3rd strings. So it's the first part is, and then I'm hitting open strings. So there I'm hitting open 1st and 3rd, 2nd string, 3rd string, 2nd and then 1st strings. So it's, and you can play this in different parts of the guitar. So that first part you can play here, and here I am on this G chord up on the 7th fret. So this little shape here is on the 8th fret of the 2nd string and the 9th fret of the 4th string. So I'm playing the exact same relationship as I did right here. So here's the shape, and I'm barring 10th fret, 2nd and 4th strings, back down, barring 7th fret, 2nd and 4th strings. So it's, and then that E minor, rather than playing the open strings again, you can play it here or here. So this shape right here is this little triangular shape here on the 4th fret of the 3rd string and the 5th fret of the 2nd and 4th strings. Or here on the 9th fret of the 3rd and 4th strings, and then the 10th fret of the 5th string. It's like a little L shape. So those are equivalent. So the open strings here or here can be substituted for that little part of the riff. So you can play a mixture. Down there, if you're playing it here, you can go there or you can go little shape right there. It depends where you're playing to help yourself. So you don't have to jump all the way down if you want to play it down there. If your hand is already here, you can play the little riff in this section of the fretboard. There's a little riff on the line that goes, "You, my brown-eyed girl." It sounds like this. You, my brown-eyed girl. What's happening there is I'm going to the C shape, adding the second string note here on the 3rd fret, and then playing open again, and then adding the 3rd fret note on the 1st string. So it's, and then I go to the D, and then there I'm just manipulating the D, taking off that 1st string note, so it's open, and then adding it back on. So the whole riff sounds like. You can play that riff here on the 5th fret of the C. So what I'm doing there is I'm playing this 5th fret C chord, 2nd, 3rd, and 4th strings, adding the 7th fret note here on the 3rd string, playing the 2nd and 3rd strings of the C chord, and then adding this 8th fret note on the 2nd string, and then I go to the D, and then there I'm adding the 9th fret note on the 3rd string, and then finishing just back on the D again. So it's, which is equivalent to. The transition sounds like this. Do you remember when we used to sing sha-la-la-la? Here's the tablature for the transition. The rhythm on the sha-la-las is G to C to G to D7. Sha-la-la-la-la-la-la-la-la-la-la-la-la. Sha-la-la-la-la-la-la-la-la-la-la. The strumming pattern on the sha-la-la part is kind of like. So on the G and C, it's down, down, up, up. Down, down, up, up, back to the G, down, down, up, up, and then on the D7 I do down, up, up, up. So upstrokes on that D7 chord. Here's the lead up to the solo and the solo itself. Here's the tablature for the lead-in to the solo and the bass solo itself. Next I'll talk about 6 different signature riffs that appear in the verse section. You can include these in your own playing to add variety to how you play the verses. The first signature line can be used in place of a D chord. It sounds like this. What I'm doing there is I'm sliding up to this little D shape, but I'm just focused on the 1st and 3rd string. So I'm sliding up to this 11th fret note on the 3rd string, hitting the 1st string on the 10th fret, down to the C, again 1st and 3rd strings, 7th fret, 1st and 3rd strings, and then 5th fret. So it's, and then back to whatever you're doing next. The second signature line is off of a G chord. It sounds like this. So what I'm doing there is I'm playing the G. Again, I'm focused on the 1st and 3rd strings. Up to the 5th fret, sliding up to the 7th fret, down to the 5th, and then back to the G shape again. So that can be substituted anytime a G chord is played. This next little line can be substituted for a D chord. It sounds like this. So in context it sounds like. That one is similar to the substitution on the G chord, except you're starting here on the 5th fret. So you're basically barring the 5th fret, playing the 1st and 3rd strings, sliding up to 7, down to 5, and then landing on the G. But you use that in place of the D chord. The next signature line is in substitution of a C chord and sounds like this. So that little riff starts off in a C shape. Again, I'm playing strings 1 and 3, sliding up to the 12th fret, strings 1 and 3, down to the 10th fret, and then back to C. So it sounds like, and that you substitute for any C chord that appears. This next one can be used as a substitution for a G chord and a D chord together. It sounds like. So what's happening there is the substitution for the G chord, just like before, and then the substitution for a D chord. I'm playing 2nd fret, 1st and 3rd strings, up to the G shape, 5th fret, down to the G shape again, and then down to the 2nd fret again, the D chord. So it sounds like. This next one can be used to substitute a G chord followed by a D chord again. So it sounds like. What I'm doing there is I'm making a little G shape here on the 7th fret, and then I'm adding that 8th fret note on the 1st string, up to the 10th fret note, back down to that 8th fret note, back down to the G, and then I have this D shape here, barring the 7th fret of the 2nd and 3rd strings. And I'm basically doing the same thing. So I'm doing the 2nd and 3rd string, adding the 8th fret note on the 2nd string, up to the 10th fret note on the 2nd string, back down to the 8th fret note, and then back down to the D bar chord again. So the whole thing sounds like.